All right, let's take you back to early summer now. That is when Mayor Ted Wheeler proposed an idea. No more open drug use. For example, no more smoking fentanyl on the street. Though just days after introducing said idea, he backtracked. Wheeler admitted the ordinance, if passed, would likely be challenged in court because of an old state law. We'll get to that in a moment. But his second reason for ditching that idea was a new state law signed by Governor Kotek that had to do with fentanyl possession, which leads us to a question that viewer Veronica emailed us earlier this month. Veronica asked, what is the update on a bill that Governor Kotek was supposed to sign that would make it illegal to do drugs out in the open? I thought that was the reason why Ted Wheeler backpedaled on why he wasn't going to make it illegal in the city, because Kotek was going to put in some state law instead. Great question. Well, Veronica, here is the answer. The governor signed House Bill 2645, but, and it is a big but, it doesn't say anything about open-air drug use. The law makes possession of fentanyl a misdemeanor, but only certain amounts of fentanyl. Anyone found with 1 gram or more, that's essentially 5 individual doses of fentanyl, can be charged with a Class A misdemeanor. The penalties for that, up to 364 days in jail, a fine of just over $6,000, or both. But again, the new law says nothing about using drugs in public places. And it turns out City Commissioner Rene Gonzalez and the mayor plan to reintroduce an open-air drug use ban to City Council sometime next week. Our Pat Doris caught up with the commissioner earlier this week.
We're all seeing it, regularly, this outside consumption of hard drugs, and then one comes after it. We don't want our kids inhaling that as they're walking down the street. We don't want to breathe it. And we certainly don't want to see the behaviors that come in the immediate aftermath.
Well, Gonzalez there adds the proposal has been co-sponsored by the rest of council for what they call a unified message from City Hall. And the new proposal is nearly the same as Wheeler's first try, with one change here. The ordinance change would expand the city law that makes it illegal to drink liquor in public to include using drugs in public. Violators could be fined as much as $500 or get 6 months in jail, or theoretically both.
It does seem pretty crazy that you cannot drink a beer on the sidewalk, but you can shoot up.
It's insane. And it's crazy that cities can address the former but can't do the latter, that this right to regulate has been taken away from cities. It doesn't make any sense. And frankly, there were proponents of Measure 110 who would say at great lengths that cities can regulate outside consumption and sales. Well, it turns out they were wrong. There was another provision of state law that was overlooked that ties our hands. And so we're going to need help from the state legislature from that. So that's got to be the other part of this, that state legislature gives us the right to enforce here.
And that brings us to the difference between Wheeler's first proposal and this one. The new plan has what's called a trigger amendment. If that sounds familiar, we've talked about that sort of thing around abortion laws in other states. A trigger amendment would mean the law would be immediately enforceable after state lawmakers or courts take action. Because here is the thing. Even if council makes the change, as Gonzalez mentioned there, they can't enforce it because of a state law. So what is that law? Our friends at the Oregonian, fortunately, took a deep dive. We think their article is worth your time. All right, here is the headline that Shane Dixon Kavanaugh wrote up earlier this month. Portland can ban drinking in public, but not smoking meth or fentanyl. Oregon law is to blame. And we have to go back to 1971, more than a half century ago, to when state lawmakers created the Uniform Alcoholism and Intoxication Treatment Act. You kind of wonder how they come up with these names sometimes, right? Whatever it is called, its goal was to stop dealing with public drunkenness as a criminal offense and instead treat it as a health problem. Sound familiar? The law forbids local governments from creating ordinances that penalize public drunkenness except in specified locations. So cities banned drinking on sidewalks, on streets, on public rights of way. In 1977, that law was amended, though, to include drugs, meaning it's not a crime to be under the influence of drugs except while driving. Here's the thing, though. Those changes did not allow for any exemptions for local governments like they did with drinking. That is because back in 77, it really didn't matter. Drug possession was illegal, so why would a city need to ban drug use on public property? I mean, it would be a moot point, as the Oregonian put it. But you can kind of see where this is going, right? Along comes 2020, Measure 110 decriminalizes controlled substances. Cities and local governments are still unable to ban open-air drug use, and that is why Gonzalez and Wheeler added that trigger amendment this time around. Think of the new council proposal as sort of laying the groundwork there. If it passes, council will be waiting until the legislature gives that power to local governments. And if that happens, it kicks in right away.
When we pass this, and I think there's a good chance it's going to pass 5-0 at City Council. Again, we'll see, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. We can't enforce until we get the changes in state law. And I think for Portlanders, they're a little bit tired of just talk. They want to see changes in outcome, right? And on this one, unfortunately, we just need help. But there's also a message to the country. Don't come to Portland to camp out and do hard drugs. So I think it is very, very important to Portlanders that they see results and outcomes. They've lost their patients rightfully so. But externally, we need to change the narrative about Portland. We cannot continue to have these numbers of migratory homeless coming here to do hard drugs, to camp out on our streets. So I emphasize to Portlanders, we're going to do everything in our power to improve things between now and the end of the commission form of government. And we know you need results. But to the rest of the country, the message is don't come to Portland to do hard drugs. And the message is very, very important, in my opinion.
I mean, that's what we hear from you at the story. Solutions, action, results, right? Your emails and comments all the time. There's more here to go along with the open air drug use proposal. Wheeler's office actually wrote a separate resolution directing the city's Office of Government Relations to work on getting people together to lobby lawmakers in Salem to allow cities to ban open air drug use during the short session of the legislature next year. It's no secret, of course, that Measure 110 was the hinge that changed all of this in the legal landscape. Pat asked Gonzalez a question that we hear from you on a nearly weekly basis.
Why doesn't the Portland City Council or an individual commissioner, why don't any of you guys just start an initiative petition to overturn 110?
I kind of get the sense there will be some efforts there. I think the decriminalization of Measure 110 I think there's a lot of appetite for revisiting that. I think the dollars for addiction services that come through Measure 110 actually has broader support than the decriminalization. So I'm at a point where we've got to address the decriminalization. I think that was a terrible mistake. The stick and carrots that were sort of forgotten, that balance. It's all carrots, no sticks. But the dollars available for addiction services that Measure 110 promised, it hasn't been delivered as promised, but there's still optimism that can do some good. So I feel like we're going to see something in the next year on this, and cleaning up some of its provisions, whether the state legislature proactively does that or someone does something in a ballot measure. I just think this is the way those winds are blowing.
All right, there you have it. So what are your thoughts on either the open air drug use ordinance, Gonzalez comments around Measure 110, or really anything else? Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave us a voicemail. I know the team here listens to every single one. That number for you, 503-226-5090.